Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today we're going to be talking about the Montreal Canadiens' first overall pick and a couple of trade targets that have been revealed, especially over these past couple of days. Now, with the Habs winning the draft lottery, a ton of options have opened up to them. But we've seen some pretty big trade rumors surrounding that first overall pick and trades they possibly could make. So when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens, could they trade the first overall pick? What could they get back and what are the latest Habs trade rumors? Watch till the end for all the trade talk and make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are new. 50% of the people that are watching are not subscribed, so hit that subscribe button for more hockey content. And without further ado, let's get into the craziness with Montreal. We have gotten a couple of trade rumors after the Habs did get first overall that could point us towards a potential trade. Now, the first one that kind of came out of nowhere was from Jeff Marek on his latest 32 Thoughts podcast, and he was talking about this situation with Montreal, what they could potentially do with the first overall pick, what trades we could potentially see, and he proposed this honestly insane trade. And it goes as follows. The Coyotes will send the third overall pick from this year and their first in 2023 for Montreal's first overall pick. And when I saw this, I thought it was an absolute joke. I thought it was a joke. I thought somebody was lying to us. It wasn't, and although it is just a proposal, at the same time, if this trade actually does go down, it would be one of the biggest steals in Montreal Canadiens history. I don't think there's much of a difference between Shane Wright's and third overall. There definitely is something there, and I think for Montreal, Shane Wright is the guy they want to go after. But at the same time, if New Jersey keeps that pick and keeps number 2, they're likely taking Juraj Slafkovsky, which means for Montreal, Logan Cooley would be available at number 3, and in some ways, I think is an even better fit on the Habs than Shane Wright is. So you don't even get that much of a downgrade at third overall, and you get Arizona's 2023 first rounder, which we all know is going to be fantastic. But here's the reason I thought it was fake instantly. Just think about this trade from the Arizona Coyotes perspective. They've committed to that rebuild. That roster is going to suck it up next year. This team is going to be bottom 5 at the very least, and again will be in contention for the first overall pick, just like they were this season. Arizona has fully gone in that direction. What motive would they have to even get the first overall pick? And here's the thing that I think is the most interesting part. It's not like Arizona has 20th overall or something, and they're moving all the way up to first overall. This is from third to first. And I think for the Coyotes, you still get a great player there, whether it's a Cooley, a Nemetz, a Slafkovsky. Whenever you get a number 3 is going to be a great talent to add to your roster. And I think for Arizona, you look at it from their perspective, why in the heck would they trade up just 2 spots and give up their 2023 first rounder in a draft in 2023 that is absolutely stacked? It just makes no sense. And you look in that 2023 draft, and that's what's most important here, because a top 5 pick absolutely blows 2022 out of the water. Shane Wright could maybe make the top 5 if he was in 2023, but I don't think so. That draft is so high end with Bedard, with Michkov, with Dvorsky, with Adam Fantilli at the very top of the draft. There's so much talent there, and for Arizona, it's just not worth taking that risk to get a slight upgrade. And yes, for Montreal, although no pick is confirmed to be in that bottom 5, Arizona might be better somehow, and even with the lottery odds, there is a chance that they don't even get a top 3 pick. But at the same time, the chance that you do outweighs the risk, in my opinion. Sure, you'd go down to third overall, but again, I don't think that's much of a problem for the Habs, and if a guy like Slafkovsky or Cooley is available, which is what is going to be the case, you're going to get either of those 2 guys at the very least. To me, it would be an absolute slam dunk trade for Montreal to make. If they got this trade offer today, they would have accepted it already. That's how quick they're would want to make this deal happen, because it just does seem to favor Montreal so much. Yes, Shane Wright would be incredible on Arizona, and I think would definitely fit what they're trying to build, especially with them picking Dylan Guenther in the last draft and having some need at center. But at the same time, to give up a big chance at a top 5 pick in 2023 would be horrible for a team like Arizona that needs that long-term future as much as possible. And again, I just don't think trading up from third to first is nearly worth it, especially when the top end of this draft in Shane Wright isn't that generational prospect. But that's why draft years matter so much, because let's say this is a 2023 situation where Montreal has the first overall pick and Arizona has third, and they want to trade maybe a 2024 pick. If that's the case, then yeah, I could see this being the case. If you want to go all the way up to draft Connor Bedard, absolutely, I could see where they're coming from. But this is Shane Wright from a player like Logan Cooley. There's not much of a difference there, and in my opinion, with this draft, it would be a foolish trade to make. 2023, it would be pretty interesting, but this year, there's no way that happens. Now, there is still other options for that first overall pick, and there was also another trade rumor here from TVA Sports who was talking about this situation. I think one of the writers there was bringing this situation up in a potential trade with that first overall pick, and I'm going to be paraphrasing it from this tweets from JustHabs18, where they said this: TVA Sports trying to trade the first overall pick for Pierre-Luc Dubois, bruh. And this also kind of came out of nowhere, and again, just leads us to more trade rumors involving this first overall pick. But apparently, there was a linkage between the first overall pick and Pierre-Luc Dubois, and there was also confirmation that the Habs do want PLD, and they're extremely interested in him. Whether that comes with trading the first overall pick or a different trade, maybe involving Calgary's first, we'll have to wait and see. But Montreal does want Pierre-Luc Dubois, and there was also rumors that, again, even if it wasn't the first overall pick, we could see the Habs potentially trading for him this offseason. Now, let's talk about Pierre-Luc Dubois for a second, because this last year was pretty productive for him, and he finally seemed to break out with Winnipeg like we kind of expected him to do in year one. In 81 games in 2022, he got 28 goals, 32 assists for 60 points, and in my opinion, was probably the most balanced Winnipeg Jets player and forward on that team this last year. But you see some of the production last season, 2021, he only got 20 points in 41 games, but again, this year taking that next full step and really being a huge part of that Jets team going forward. The only problem really becomes that contract and Winnipeg trying to sign him long term, and that's where kind of some of the trade rumors start to come with Winnipeg maybe having some trouble with him being a UFA in a couple seasons. They might want to go after him and might want to trade him away, potentially to a team like Montreal. And in terms of the actual fit at hand, it would be interesting, because when it comes to Pierre-Luc Dubois, he isn't too old. He's 23 years old, still in the heart of his career, and still has room to improve as well. And obviously, since he is French and from Quebec, there is a connection there too. And when it comes to the center situation as well, if you do want to trade that first overall pick, you do get a bona fide top six centerman who can play at a great level. But at the same time, the question becomes, is it worth trading a guy like Shane Wright for Dubois? And in my opinion, I think Shane Wright will probably be a little bit of a better version than Dubois, but I don't think there's going to be much of a difference. And in my opinion, with Shane Wright, he'll probably be around a 35-point goal guy, probably around a 75-point guy annually, and I think could a couple of times get over a point per game along the right line mates, like potentially Cole Caulfield and other players in the future for Montreal coming up. So there is potential there offensively, and obviously with Pierre-Luc Dubois, his best season was in 2019, where he got 61 points in 82 games, and again got back to that level this last season. But even though he is 23 years old, the question becomes how much better offensively can Pierre-Luc Dubois be? And especially comparing Winnipeg's top six with Montreal's top six, there's a big discrepancy there on offense. And in my opinion, if you do add Pierre-Luc Dubois to this Habs team, I think he'll only be around that 60-point range for the rest of his career, at least in the prime of his career, because I don't think he's going to be at that level while also producing the great defense he has. So in Montreal, considering that, if you trade the first overall pick for him, I think Shane Wright has more potential. I think he also could even be a better overall player and be a first-line centerman. With Dubois, there is potential for that, but I think in Montreal, we'll have to temper expectations. Just the same as well with Christian Dvorak, with how awful the wing situation has been with Montreal, how bad the support has been there. It's fair to say that Dubois' production would probably dip a bit, but considering Shane Wright's talent and overall consistency, that's a player that I'd rather take over Pierre-Luc Dubois, especially if there's not anything added onto that. If it's just Pierre-Luc Dubois for a first overall pick in Shane Wright, I think that's just a bad trade, simply put, for the Habs. But in saying that, that was with the assumption that Dubois would be signed long-term. And here is really the biggest problem, and even the biggest problem for the Winnipeg Jets in the Dubois situation is that contract. He makes $5 million this year, will be an RFA after this season, and could also push to be a UFA in a few years' time. To me, that contract is the biggest issue, and even though you still have control of him being an RFA, that is going to be an issue the Habs will have to deal with, and probably a lengthy issue they're going to have to deal with if they were to trade for him. And especially if you trade that first round pick, you want to have a guy sign long term. You want to have him for sure on your roster for the next decade at least. And with Dubois, there is questions of if he would stay in Montreal, where the money might be, and if the Habs are going to sign him long term. And that's the biggest problem for me. Now, there is still a potential that we do see a Dubois trade, and I think it would be much more likely that we see the Flames first round pick involved in it, maybe a Flames first round pick, maybe a second round pick on top of that, if Winnipeg is truly going in a more rebuilding direction. But that's just the big question. If Winnipeg wants to trade Dubois, I think it has to come down to them not being able to sign him long term. But we were already talking about earlier with a Mark Scheifele trade, if we could see that. And to me, for Winnipeg, it's much more likely they trade Scheifele than they do Pierre-Luc Dubois. There will obviously be a lot of cap that opens up with Scheifele's deal gone, but at the same time, it just feels like for the Jets, Dubois will be their number one priority and will likely be signed this offseason, which leaves less options for the Montreal Canadiens to work with. And I think to make a trade happen, the Habs would at least have to have maybe a second, maybe a third on top of Dubois to actually justify that trade, because in my opinion, Wright feels a lot better for this rebuild and fits the timetable a lot better too. Even though Dubois is still young at 23, with Wright, he's 5 years younger and I think has the potential to be better. Yes, you have to develop Shane Wright and you have to get that underway, but at the same time, for Montreal, that's what they should be prioritizing, is that development and this rebuild. And considering the circumstances, considering this team that will likely not be much better next season, to me, Shane Wright, drafting him and taking the 5-year younger player makes a lot more sense. If Montreal fully commits to this rebuild and is once again in the dumpster next season, not having Shane Wright instead of Pierre-Luc Dubois would hurt quite a bit. Instead, if you have a top 5 pick in 2023, you could have Shane Wright and you could have a guy like Bedard or a Michkov or a Dvorsky on top of a player like that, which just makes this Habs rebuild even more lethal. And you combine that with the younger defensemen coming up like Kaden Guhle, with other players like Jordan Harris, it's going to be a fantastic rebuild if the Habs stick with this timetable. And Shane Wright is a huge part of that. But that'll be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you did enjoy my rant and discussion about this, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Let me know in the comments down below, would you trade the first overall pick if you're the Montreal Canadiens? Would you trade him for trade it for Pierre-Luc Dubois? Would you make that Arizona trade? And what do you think about all the deals we've discussed so far? Let me know all your thoughts down below. Of course, share this video with your friends, get it out there to any hockey fans you guys know online, and of course, click this card for all my hockey prospects talk right in one playlist. My name is Nathan. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.